So welcome, everyone. I am Suzi Lula, for those of you who are just meeting me for the first time. And this is my free masterclass called The Emotional Messenger System, the Art and Practice of Emotional Self-Care. I'm so happy to have all of you with us, and I'm grateful to dive deep into the world of our emotions today. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a deep dive. And first and foremost, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about me for those of you who are just meeting me. My name is Suzi Lula. I'm a spiritual counselor, and I've been in private practice for almost 20 years now. And I'm also a new author. I just wrote a book called The Motherhood Evolution: How Thriving Mothers Raise Thriving Children. And one of the things that is nearest and dearest to my heart is to teach about our emotions. And a good bit of the book is dedicated to this system that I have created over these 20 years in private practice called the Emotional Messenger System. It's a process that I've developed. And one of the reasons I think I wrote the book and developed this system came from my son. I'm also a mom, and I have a 14-year-old, so I have a teenager. And I think that becoming a mother, I had already been on a spiritual path for quite a long time, a path of personal growth, personal development. It was when I had my son, I honestly think that I thought I was going to be a better mom than I was, and I thought it was going to come easier to me than it did. And one of the common denominators for me, day in and day out, was this world of navigating my emotions. I found myself, although I had been on a path of spiritual growth for a long time, I found myself quite reactive with my son when he was young. And so it set me on this journey of, why is it that someone like me who has been studying for quite a long time has this beautiful, beautiful child, and I find myself tantruming myself. I find myself with so much reactivity, and I found myself not being the mom that I knew I wanted to be, and not being the mom that I knew was deep inside of me to be. So this was my journey on learning how to not only navigate my emotions, but to truly learn a system whereby I created emotional maturity within myself, emotional equanimity within myself. And this is what I'm passionate about teaching, especially those of you who are parents and might be dealing with some of the same things that I found myself dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So welcome, everyone. Relax. As I said, I'm going to be supplying you all with a replay, so you don't need to remember any of this. You're welcome to take notes, though, if you'd like to get a journal, maybe light a candle. I wanted to give you all a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do in this next bit of time. Going to have us all in a moment close our eyes. I'll take you through a little centering, and we'll all set an intention for our time together. And then I'm going to do a little bit of teaching on the world of emotions and provide you all with some tools to equip you when dealing with your own, as I call them, big feelings, as well as the big feelings that your children can have, or your spouse or partner, friends, coworkers. And then I'm going to take us through a guided meditation, an experiential process that you all can play again over and over again and work with. And then lastly, I will provide you all with some practical tools to take with you and some assignments. I'm really big on assignments. I like to give us lots to practice. And then I will tell you about a 4-week class where each week we are going to dive deep into this world of our emotions, and I'm going to assist us to really create and cultivate this way of emotional maturity and emotional equanimity, even from the darkest, most intense emotional patterns, habits, and tangles, as I call them. So let's just all take another deep breath in. Become still. And then, if it feels right to you, just gently close your eyes and we will set our intention for this time together. So as you gently close your eyes, simply become aware of your breath. Allow your breath to become slower and deeper. Become aware that the deepest place we can inhale is right there within our lungs. And our lungs are the part of our body that cradle our heart. So allow your mind to simply rest in your heart for these next few moments. Remind yourself that there is nowhere else that is more important for you to be than right here, connecting with your own heart, with your own inner wisdom, with your own intuition, and with your highest self. As you become aware of your breath and allow it to take you deeper, we simply ask, what is my intention for this free masterclass? When I walk away, when I move back into my world, my life, my relationships, what is it that I would most value taking with me? What is it that would make me so glad that I invested my time here? And that will serve as your intention. Perhaps it's a quality. Perhaps you're looking for more emotional equanimity, emotional freedom. Perhaps you're looking for a deeper connection within yourself, a deeper connection with your children, with those around you. Just allow it to bubble up inside of you. My intention for this class is. And then whenever you're ready, gently open your eyes. So we have our intention. And know that the power of setting an intention means that you have already elevated your consciousness. You have already risen to a higher state and level of consciousness just because you have been willing to set an intention. The word intend means to stretch into. So when we set an intention, we are in essence saying, I am willing to stretch into that which I know is possible for me. So this world of emotions, I find that the world of emotions is one of the most misunderstood areas of our culture, our society, in our families. Mostly, we are taught to avoid uncomfortable feelings at all costs. Either we push them away, we numb out to them, we try to bypass them, or they are so close to us and we have embodied them to such a degree and enmeshed with them to such a degree that we think we are the uncomfortable emotions. And we are taught we have many misunderstandings around the world of emotions. And so I'm here to help us untangle some of these misbeliefs around the world of emotions. So as I said, we're taught to avoid these emotions. Now, why are we taught to avoid uncomfortable emotions? I believe that one of the deepest misunderstandings we have is that we are taught in some way, shape, or form that life is meant to be comfortable. Now think about this. If you are holding a belief inside of you that says life is meant to be comfortable, then every time you bump up against something that is uncomfortable, it's like sandpaper in your consciousness. On the one hand, I'm taught that life is supposed to be comfortable, and if it's uncomfortable, something must be wrong. And so it starts this push-pull, it starts this resistance. If I think that life is meant to be comfortable, every time something uncomfortable comes into my world, I try to push it away. So the first thing that we want to do is consider the possibility that, in fact, life isn't meant to always be comfortable, and we are given everything that we need on this journey when, in fact, life is uncomfortable. So think about it. Every one of us, what is something that every one of us has in common? Every one of us has experienced birth. And when you think of the process of birth, there we all are, comfortable in the womb. And at some point, we go through this very narrow, small birth canal. There's expansion, there's constriction. There's expansion, there's constriction. So I believe that each one of us deep down knows that life is meant to sometimes be uncomfortable. That is the way we sometimes grow and evolve. Not that we are calling discomfort into our life, but I want you to feel comforted and reassured that discomfort and navigating the discomfort is something that you are born knowing how to do. And we rob ourselves of this empowered knowing when we tell ourselves that life is supposed to be comfortable, because then we try to push away the discomfort. And I'm here to tell you that you have every within you because you were born. You made it through the birth canal. You made it through the discomfort of the birthing process. And you have everything in you to connect with your highest wisdom and your highest self in navigating all of the discomfort that comes into your world. So let's just take a deep breath on that. It's something to consider. It's something to contemplate. And what I found is that just the knowing that you have everything inside of you to navigate the different emotional situations that will come into your life is enough to transform your life. It's a very empowered stance. Thinking that life is meant to be comfortable and you don't have the tools to navigate it is a very unempowering stance to take in life, and it leaves us in a victim position. And as we contemplate that, let's talk about some real practical examples and how you may use this right away in your life. Albert Einstein said that we cannot solve the problem at the level of consciousness that created the problem. So the next thing I'm going to teach you is how to rise above whatever emotional activity, reactivity, energy is happening in your world. So let's say something as simple as you have a toddler and you say it's time to brush your teeth and they throw a temper tantrum. Or you have a 6-year-old and it's time to put down their iPad or their toy and leave a play date, and they throw down that toy or they start hitting you. Or let's say you have a teenager and you ask that teenager to please put down their telephone or do their homework. Or perhaps you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse about parenting or about your marriage. Perhaps you are seeking to go in and have a conversation with your boss about a promotion or a project, and you begin to feel your own emotional reactivity. When you begin to feel that emotional reactivity, one of two things usually happens. Unconsciously, you either try to push away that feeling, or unconsciously, you enmesh with that feeling and you think that you are the emotion. So let's say I've asked my child to do his chores, and I feel this emotional reactivity bubbling up within me. Perhaps I feel frustrated. Perhaps I feel overwhelmed. Perhaps I feel tired. Perhaps I feel empty. Perhaps I feel like I've asked him 10 times and I just can't ask him again. Perhaps I'm judging him. Perhaps I'm judging myself. All of this emotional reactivity, what I call knots itself. So I like to use this cord. Many of you who work with me know this cord well. I call it the golden cord. And so easy flowing cord when we are connected with ourselves and our children, let's say. And something as simple as asking our children to do their homework can create a knot. That's what I call a knot, an emotional knot. And then let's say I'm frustrated with my son, and so I raise my voice and I use a tone that I don't like with him. And then later, I go and beat myself up for using that tone and becoming impatient with my son. Then I have a knot on top of a knot. And maybe I'm judging myself and I'm judging him, and this is how we end up with knots on top of knots on top of knots. So I call these our emotional tangles, right? Now, back to what Albert Einstein said. He said, we cannot solve the problem at the level of consciousness that created the problem. So what most of us are taught is either to try to push away this emotional material and pretend that we don't have these knots, or we think we're so close to them, we think that we are these knots. And either way, we're looking at it from the level of consciousness that created it. And so we have no distance, no detachment. We have no relationship with the emotion. And so I'm going to take you all through a guided process that I call the mountaintop. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a different perspective on this knot. Instead of looking at this knot and feeling overwhelmed by the emotional activity and energy, I'm going to elevate your consciousness so that you're looking down at the emotional reactivity, and it's going to seem smaller. Therefore, and thereby, you will be able to have an effective, healthy relationship with this. Now, this, I want you to practice it today. And if you join me in the 4-week class, which I am so hoping you will, we're going to do this on such a regular basis. We're going to immerse ourselves for 21 days practicing this. So I guarantee you by the end of the 21 days, you are going to know how to navigate your own emotions and those of your children to such a degree that what happens is once you navigate them, the knots untangle, and what happens is that you have a very deep, connected relationship, both within yourself and a deep, connected relationship with your children. Because what do our children want from us more than anything else? They want intimacy. They want connection with us. And what I find more than anything else is that parents want, of course, we want this intimate, connected relationship with our children, but these emotional tangles are what get in the way. We don't know what to do when our child is stomping their feet and throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of the grocery store, or they're throwing a temper tantrum and they won't brush their teeth, or they're slamming their door and they won't get off of their phone. We as parents are caught up in our own emotional reactivity, but we're also wondering, do I discipline? How do I remain peaceful? Do I create consequences? How do I create healthy boundaries that I can consistently enforce? These are the daily questions that come up. And unless and until we learn how to untangle these emotional knots, we're going to stay present with the emotional knot rather than create the ability to have this connected relationship that we're all so longing to have. I'm going to take us through a guided process so that you can use a real example from your life, and then you'll have it to take away with you and practice. You'll also receive the replay from today, and so you're going to be able to practice until class begins on March 9th. So again, let's take a nice deep breath in. And I want you to think of something small, but something real that's happening in your life where your own emotional reactivity is concerned. Perhaps it is one of the examples that I said. Perhaps yesterday you asked your child to put down their iPad and they threw a fit. Perhaps you're grappling with what is setting, a positive boundary, or perhaps you're grappling with what do I create, consequences. Perhaps you're grappling with discipline, or what is peaceful parenting, conscious parenting. Perhaps you are thinking of, just asking your child, or trying to get out of the door in the morning with your child. You're finding yourself rushed. Anything that is a real example, an authentic example. You don't have to have something huge. It can be something really small, because the principle will be the same, whether you're working with a small example or a huge example. So as you're calling that example to mind, just gently close your eyes again. Take a nice deep breath in and exhale. Again, simply allowing your breath to allow your mind to rest in your heart. Your heart is where you'll find your wisdom. As your eyes are closed, you're becoming aware of your breath. I want you to begin to, with your eyes closed, see yourself in your mind's eye, sitting in the chair that you're sitting in the room that you're sitting in. And as you're becoming aware, with your eyes closed, your inner eye is seeing yourself sitting in your chair. I want you to allow your highest self to rise up in consciousness. So you're having this experience. I call it a simultaneous experience, where your inner eye is seeing yourself sitting in your chair, and your highest self is rising up. Your highest self is hovering around your ceiling, perhaps. And your highest self is now looking down at yourself seated in your chair. Perhaps your highest self is rising even higher, as if you're taking off in an airplane. When we take off in an airplane, the higher the altitude, the houses, the cars, the individuals seem smaller the higher we get. The size of the house doesn't change, but our altitude, our perspective changes. So I want you to see that your highest self is rising up, maybe the height of a tree. Maybe you're feeling yourself at the top of a mountain. Your highest self is at the top of this mountain, and you are aware, I feel so free. There's no ceiling above me. There's no limitation. There's no boundary. There's no walls. There's only open, infinite space. And your highest self is now in this elevated consciousness, and you're looking down at whatever was your emotional trigger, your emotional situation. So the situation now seems smaller, and I want you to see that situation so small that you can actually hold it in your arms, as if you're holding a very small, vulnerable, fragile child in your arms. So let's just say that you were working with your toddler throwing a tantrum and your own frustration. You're now at the top of the mountain and you're looking down, and you're looking down through the eyes of your highest self, which is infused with self-compassion. So from this elevated space, you're looking down and you're hearing yourself say to yourself, oh, I see that you are so challenged when your child does X, Y, and Z. I see your intention. And I see that you are so challenged. I see that you're frustrated. I see that you feel overwhelmed. I see that you feel helpless or powerless. Just begin to allow your highest self, through this very compassionate tone, hold yourself in your own arms. See yourself as vulnerable, fragile, doing the best you can with what you have to work with. When you do, you're going to feel an inner connection. You might not have an answer yet, but you will have an inner connection. This is step one. So your eyes are closed. Your highest self is up on the top of this mountain. You're looking down at yourself. You're seeing yourself as vulnerable, doing the best you can, and your highest self, through these tone and words of compassion, is saying to yourself, I see that you're having a hard time. You're seeing this situation as vulnerable, and you're holding it in your own arms. And now, from your highest self, this elevated place at the top of a mountain, you look down and you ask, right there in the center of your emotions, you ask, what message do you have for me? What insight do you have for me? What is it that in this situation, I am here to learn about myself? Maybe if you were overwhelmed and frustrated, maybe the message is that you're needing to take better care of yourself. Maybe if you're exhausted, maybe the message is that you're needing more emotional bandwidth to handle these situations. Maybe the message that's coming up is that you are looking for some forgiveness. Maybe the message coming up is that you are needing to forgive yourself and drop some of the self-judgments that you have. Perhaps the message coming up is that you need to lighten up on yourself. Perhaps the message is that you need more tools in your toolbox. Whatever it is, simply listen for the message and for the insight. There is a message and there is an insight. Even if it doesn't come in this moment, I promise you, within every emotion is a message. So right now, you're just listening for the message. Whenever you receive the message, you set an intention with yourself to honor the desire, the need, the message, the insight. You set an intention to find a way to honor that, to provide for yourself whatever it is that that emotion needs, whatever it is that that emotion or that situation is seeking. You set an intention with yourself to provide that for yourself. And if no message has come yet, that happens often. This is a new process. You're just learning it. So set an intention that the message comes to you later. It will come to you when you're the most relaxed. Maybe when you're in the car driving later on. Maybe when you're taking a shower. Just set the intention that you have set this in motion and the answer and the message will come. And sometimes you just need to do this over and over again to get used to this way of being in compassionate relationship with yourself. And then whenever you're ready for this moment, just gently open your eyes. So I'm going to give you all a moment. You can write here in the comment section. You can write in your journal any message that came through, any insight that came through. So as we become aware of the messages, the insights, what we are becoming aware of is that within our vulnerable self, within the place that sometimes feels fragile or is emotionally reactive, maybe we feel frustrated, we feel overwhelmed, we feel disconnected, we feel like we're not enough, we feel like we're lacking. Whatever this emotional reactivity is, in the midst, there is an unmet need. So what do I mean by this? I'm going to take back out my golden cord. So when we are in connected relationship, this energy is free flowing. We are connected inside of ourselves and with each other. When we are experiencing emotional reactivity, we're still in relationship. It's just there are some speed bumps, let's just say. There are knots in our consciousness, and that just makes the relationship feel a little tangled, let's say. Now, what I'm suggesting is rather than looking at the outer tangle, rather than looking at the situation, how do I get my child to brush their teeth? How do I, get them to do their homework? That is important. We need to create boundaries and cultivate a way of speaking and sharing so that everyone's needs are met. That is accurate. What I'm suggesting is that within the emotional reactivity itself, right there in the center of the emotional reactivity, is an unmet need. And when you elevate yourself and your highest self asks, your vulnerable self, what is it that you most need? What is the message that you are here to bring me? What is the insight? You can also ask, what is the unmet need here? Once you get that unmet need, that message, and you set an intention that you will provide that need for yourself, what happens is that the tangle dissipates and you are more able to provide for that unmet need, whatever it is. Now that can sometimes be a big journey because let's say it's an unmet need from childhood, which most of the time it is. That is a process. And when you learn how to meet your own unmet needs, one unmet need at a time, this is what is going to provide you emotional resolution, emotional equanimity, and emotional maturity. This is what we are going to be doing throughout the 4 weeks of this class. This is why this class is one of my favorite classes to teach, because literally you will transform. Literally, I promise you, you will not be the same person at the end of 4 weeks because you will have met every unmet need within you. And you'll learn how to do that systematically, and you will transform in the process. Your relationship within yourself will transform, and your relationship with your children will absolutely transform. I want to leave you all with a few practical tools, some practical skills, and some practical examples to practice with over the next few weeks until the class begins. Class begins March 9th, so I'm hoping that all of you will sign up for the class. We're also going to have a private Facebook page that you can share questions, challenges, and I'm going to provide coaching on very, very specific situations, step by step. I'd like to leave you all with some practical skills though. 2 really simple ones that you can implement right away. Let's say you call to mind a real example that you're having in your life. Your child is trying to grab your iPhone, let's say, or you're having trouble with your teenager. Perhaps they're having challenge in school, or they're feeling depressed, or you're having challenge with your partner, co-parenting. Choose something that's real and imagine yourself in that situation, and imagine that emotional reactivity coming up. You're in the middle of feeling some emotional reactivity happening, and you don't have the time to say, excuse me, let me close my eyes and go to the mountaintop. One of the easiest things to do is to say to your child or to your partner or to a friend, please just give me a minute. I need a minute. Now, when my son was young and I would read all of these books on, different parenting books, they would all say the same thing. When you feel yourself emotionally reactive, take a pause. And I would always find myself almost shouting back at these books, if I could take a pause in that moment, I would not be reading this book. What I found was that I didn't know what to do in the pause. The pause felt empty. It felt endless. And even when I was seeking to get in touch with my breath and simply breathe in the moment, in the pause, in the stillness, it felt overwhelming to me, and I didn't have the skills to navigate. So I want to share with you, the first thing to do is ask for what you need. When I'm feeling emotionally reactive with my son and I say to him, I need a minute. Please give me a minute. This is so dignifying to yourself, because what it's teaching your vulnerable self is how to ask for what you need. And most parents are taught to put their children's needs before our own needs. So we need to cultivate the language that tells ourselves and reminds ourselves that it is important to meet our own needs. It is also a very important modeling to send to our child, that they are here to have their needs met and to create a language where they know how to ask for what they need. This is called teaching them and modeling them emotional intelligence. So when you model to your child, mommy just needs a moment right now, your child hears this is a very emotionally intelligent way to speak to them. It isn't untangling your emotions yet. It is providing for your vulnerable self the language to have your own needs met. Then, when you take that moment, you imagine, oh, I see. I am in the middle of an emotional tangle right now. What is the unmet need right now? And then you tell yourself, I might not be able to provide to meet that need in this moment, but I will provide and meet that need today. I will address. Once the emotional reactivity knows that you have connected with it, it will untangle itself. It will dissipate. It will shed. It will feel soothed. It will feel relieved. And you will be able to be more present within yourself and with your child for that moment. It might sound like something like, let's say I asked my son to get off of his phone. He's 14, as I mentioned. And let's say he says, okay, mom. And yet he kind of keeps talking. He tells his friend, I've got to go. But, his friend says something back to him, and then he ends up, talking. Meanwhile, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling overwhelmed. When I say I need to take this moment and I ask myself, what is my own unmet need? Perhaps something that comes to me is, oh, I came into this evening feeling empty already. Perhaps the need is to take better emotional care of myself. Perhaps I'm really tired and I am needing to get into bed and I'm exhausted, so the need is to get into bed earlier. Perhaps his staying on the phone is triggering the way I thought or felt or perceived that I was treated when I was younger. Perhaps it's triggering in me, I'm feeling disrespected. I'm feeling like I'm not being listened to. And the emotional tangle is around feeling disrespected. And the need underneath there is to respect, learn how to respect myself, learn how to create and cultivate boundaries. So whatever it is that is there, I then have the language to say to my son, you know, I've asked you a couple of times to get off of your phone, and I'm recognizing that I am empty at this moment. I don't have any more patience left inside of me. I realize I should have taken better care of myself to get to 9 o'clock at night, and here I am, 9 o'clock, running on empty. I'm able to share with him what's going on in a way that isn't judging him, isn't blaming him, because I have connected with my own need. Now, perhaps I haven't met the need yet. Perhaps it's still a tangle in me. I'm still going to need to learn how to cultivate those boundaries. But by connecting inside of myself, what it's going to do is allow me to take ownership and responsibility of my own emotions when speaking to my son. And so it's going to, rather than sever our connection, it's going to keep our connection intact, even though I might have some emotional work to do. This is the same whether you're speaking to a toddler, your husband, a spouse, a friend, a coworker. You will use different language depending on whether we're speaking to a 4-year-old or a 14-year-old, but the principle is the same. So this is the first thing I want you to practice, is asking for a moment, taking a moment. And perhaps if you have a toddler and you're not able to take a moment in the moment, which is often the case with a toddler, take the moment as soon as you're able, because it is in the taking of the moment where you're going to inwardly reconnect with yourself. When we feel emotional reactivity, we often sever our own inner connection. And I'm teaching you how to reconnect so that you don't sever your own inner connection. And lastly, the last just practical, easy skill I want to leave you with is the do-over. I use the do-over 100 times a day, 100 times a month, with my son, with my husband, with my friends. You name it, I use it. It's simple. It is if and when I find that I look back and I don't like the tone of my voice, I'm judging myself or my son, I'm frustrated, I am not showing up as the parent I'm seeking to be. Simple. I've done this with my son since he was 2 years old. Mom needs a do-over. May I please have a do-over? And then I backtrack and I do my own version of what I've been teaching you all today with the not. I ask myself, what is my need? I tell myself I'm going to provide it for myself, and then I take ownership with my son. So let's say I walked into his room. Let's say I asked him to get off the phone. He says, sure, but he ends up talking with his friend. TikTok, I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I want to get to bed. It's 9 o'clock. He should be getting to bed. Let's say I don't handle it well. And, I say to him, I've asked you 3 times, get off the phone now. And I say it in a way that I wish I hadn't. I ask him for a do-over. I take ownership for my own tone, that I need to go back. I need to take a moment. I need to reconnect with myself. I need to ask myself, and most of all, find out what is the unmet need within me? What is the message? What is the insight? What is it that I am intending to provide for myself? That is what will calm me down. Then I say to my son, I apologize for that tone of voice. It is not the tone of voice that I want to be using with you. I've done this since he was 2. So you find your age appropriate way to say, if you have a toddler, you say, I am so sorry that I used that tone of voice. I bet that was a scary tone of voice to hear, And then you take ownership. It's not the way I want to talk to you. I want to use a light voice. I want to use a happy voice. I want to use a connecting voice. I want to use connecting words. You say to your own child or to the other individual, I asking for a do-over. There is nothing more dignifying than a do-over, because the other individual hears, perceives that you are intending to connect with them. You want the connection, that the connection is important to you. Think about when you were a child. What did you most want from those around you? You wanted to belong. You wanted to feel connected. This is what our children want most. And a do-over models to them that they don't need to be perfect. They can be imperfect and they can be connected at the same time. So you can be imperfect as a parent and you can stay connected at the same time. You can say, I don't really love the way I just handled that. I want to handle it, in a way that lines up with the mom I want to be. Here, let me try that again. It lightens up the situation. You will end up laughing. And when and if you end up laughing, that's just the best. Many, 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 many times, my do-overs have ended in laughter, connection, hugs. There's nothing like a do-over to reconnect from a severed place. So let's review. We talked about life not needing to be comfortable all the time, that you have everything within you to handle life's discomforts. One of the ways is to elevate your consciousness, rise to the top of a mountain, allow your highest self to ask your emotional tangles and reactivities, what do you need from me? You can ask for do-overs. You can ask for a moment to practice reconnecting with the severed reactivity within you, that you may untangle your own knots. Now, if any of this has been assistful to you today, I can tell you that I have created this emotional messenger system over 20 years. So I promise you that over the 4 weeks of this class, we are going to dive so deep into that which brings up the most discomfort, the unresolved issues from our own childhood, with our spouses, with our parents, with our children, that you can learn how to untangle your own tangled reactivity so that you can learn to cultivate not only consistent boundaries, but you will cultivate the language of compassion. The language of self-compassion is the medicine for emotional reactivity. The language of self-compassion is the antidote to judgment and to these unresolved issues. We're going to dive deep. I'm going to teach you this language. I'm hoping that if you got anything from this webinar, that you will forward it to a friend. There is nothing that can make us feel more alone than reactivity in our parenting. We feel so alone. We feel so much shame. We feel like we're the only ones that are handling our children poorly. And if you would be so kind as to think of a parent who might be in need of untangling their own emotions, I would love to see 500 people in this class, because I know that there is nothing more important than untangling our own emotional reactivities. I can tell you that this is the single skill that has changed my relationship with my son unequivocally. I used to judge myself. I used to judge my son. I would see what he wasn't doing so much easier than what he was doing, because I looked at myself and I saw what I wasn't doing more than what I was doing. I'm telling you that this process of learning how to care for our own emotional life will single-handedly transform your relationship within yourself and with your children. Thank you. Stephanie is saying my courses are amazing. I'm very grateful to those of you who already know my work, and we are going to take a deep dive. So if you are seeking a deeper connection inside of yourself, and if you are seeking a deeper connection with your own children, if you want to learn more about peaceful parenting, whether you ever will need to use discipline, how to not use discipline but maintain boundaries. All of these questions come up on a day-to-day basis. We will cover everything. All things emotional, we shall cover. You will create emotional intimacy, emotional maturity, and emotional equanimity by the end of this 4-week class. The link is here. And lastly, if you all feel so moved, if you will share it on your own social media, I would be so grateful. I'm really passionate and clearly on a mission to assist us to reconnect with our children, the inner child within us and the children that are around us. So I thank you so much for investing your time, for trusting me today with your own vulnerable emotions. May you leave here feeling more emotionally empowered. And may we all meet here for class. And if you would be so kind, register now, and perhaps maybe even send out the replay and this registration link to any parents that you know that might be struggling. Thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you in class. You can find me, Suzi Lula, on Facebook, SuziLula.com. If you are interested in ordering my book, The Motherhood Evolution, you can download chapter 1 from Self-Sacrifice to Self-Care is the name of chapter 1, and you can download it free off of my website. And you can order the book that is now a #1 bestseller on Amazon. If you have read the book and you would be so kind as to leave a review, I would so appreciate that. Once I get to 55-star reviews on Amazon, they will start placing the book on different Amazon pages, and it helps an author a lot to get my message out to people all over the globe. And thank you all. We have so many different countries represented, so it's so neat to know that we have England represented, and South Africa, and Canada, the United States, France, Australia. So I'm looking forward to staying connected and reconnecting for class. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in class.